Welcome to the Better Than Me podcast with John Conover. And this is our first episode for 2024. And I've got an awesome guest to kick off our year, Anthony Diehl, the Meathead Professor on Instagram. Go look him up. There he is, America's Strongman 2020. He's also my personal trainer, and I don't look nearly as good as Anthony, working on it. And he's actually helped me out tremendously. We're talking about a topic today that I think he's an expert on. And as it pertains to business success, we're talking a little bit about health and nutrition. And sorry, ladies, we're talking a little bit about manhood. We're talking a little about guys, getting it together to go do what they got to go do to go win. And so Anthony, thank you so much for being on today. Really appreciate it. Maybe take us back to let us know who Anthony is. Maybe take us back to your journey in personal fitness and what got you to this point.
Cool. So I'll try to do a high 30,000 foot view. A little bit about me. I'm a husband, father. I've been married almost 15 years, 3 children. I got into strongman in 2011. Now, prior to that, I always played sports. I was a pretty athletic kid, but I was also a really chubby kid. And I went to college, and instead of gaining the freshman 15, I think I gained the freshman 50. Like, it was really bad. And I really don't know what the catalyst for change was. I just remember stepping on the scale. The last time I weighed myself, I was roughly 220, and I stepped on the scale my freshman year of college, and it was 260. And I remember my pants were getting really tight. I was like moving up to size 40 pants, and something in my brain snapped, and I'm like, I'm done. I'm just done. And so I went on this
You
journey.
had a dad bod before you were a dad.
I did. I was the king of it. It was great. And so I went on this journey. I knew nothing also about health and fitness. I just had a general intuition that I should eat meat and vegetables, and I just started moving. And I started running. I went crazy on the cardio, right? Because I didn't know any better. I didn't know how to lift weights. So I lost 90 pounds in roughly 6 or 7 months. Wow. So I lost a ton of weight. I ended up getting into weightlifting because I hurt my hip from going from fat kid to running every day for 9 months straight, right? And so I was concerned, oh no, I'm going to gain this weight back. And a friend got me into the weight room. I was incredibly weak when I started, but I realized very quickly that the upside of being the chubby kid growing up is that I was also built to be strong. Like, I just started gaining strength so fast.
Wow.
I remember within 6 months of being in the weight room, I was benching 300 pounds.
What?
So, yeah, back in the day, do you remember Chad Childs and Hank
So Anthony
Kaufman
and I went to the same college, and we worked out in the same gym, right? Two very different results.
So I realized, okay, cool. Well, I'm built to be strong, and carried that over, got married, and was working in the corporate world. So I was a manager, and then like a operations manager at Starbucks and Amazon for a while. The hobby of strongman was growing. I was getting good at it. I turned pro. I started taking on some clients, specifically just around strength training. Where I got into nutrition was my middle son was diagnosed with autism. And so naturally we went down the rabbit hole of all the ways to help him. And through that journey of learning what helped him, we pulled out gluten and dairy because, and again, I'm not anti-gluten or dairy, but in his case, they were causing inflammation. And so we pulled them out, and which helped his speech and occupational therapy. Now, at the time, I'm a strength athlete, training in the gym, heavy deadlifts, heavy presses, heavy squats. And we just, as a family, went gluten-free, dairy-free because it was so much easier on my wife than trying to just create special meals for him and then cook for the family. So essentially, when you do that, we just really cleaned up our eating. And that was really the only variable that changed. And my strength just started to go through the roof. And so This is around the time there was a shift in the strength world. I would say probably like 2010, 2012, right around this time, where before the extremely strong dudes who could just bench press a house, squat 1,000 pounds, they were all just huge and fat, right? To be a power lifter was to just be this obese gorilla of a person. But then you had guys like Dan Green coming along and other guys in the powerlifting scene breaking records, and they were lean. You had
Mhm.
Mariusz Pudzianowski in the strongman world, who's overhead pressing 400 pounds, like with abs. And it's like, okay, cool. So these guys are clearly onto something. You don't have to be a fat ass to be strong.
Huh.
Interesting. Okay. So again, I just started to explore avenues. So first it was nutrition to help my son with autism. Then it was, okay, now nutrition as a means of performance. Like not just eat everything in sight to get big, to get strong, but eat to perform. What does that look like? And so it's been a long journey. I got into the space of dealing particularly with women. I coach a ton of women around hormone health, which is very complex. And the reason I got into that is simply because if you can coach women and figure out their hormones, men are effortless, right? Because women are so much more complex. And so one thing led to the other. Like I said, like you called out, I was a professional strongman, won America's Strongest Man in 2020, switched over to bodybuilding. So I compete in that, and I also compete in jiu-jitsu. And so now I've just been
Wow.
applying everything I've learned to those specific arenas. So that's kind of the 5 minute overview.
No, it's amazing, and the audience that watches this podcast, and as the audience grows, this is a business. It's a business audience, and they're coming. So there's a couple avenues I want the audience to hear from you on a couple topics. Like one would be when you went amateur to pro in your craft. You went hobby to profession. You went amateur to pro. There was a shift that happened
Yes.
in bodybuilding for you. Now you're a business owner today. I'd have to guess that the threads of success that you learned in athletic performing and going amateur to pro, and not just pro, you won like national, you're strongest man in America, 2020. Okay. So you competed at a high level and won at a high level. There had to be some principles and some things
Yeah.
that created that shift. It's probably helped you today in business. It would probably help the audience to hear what
Yeah.
does Anthony's version of amateur to pro look like.
Well, I'm glad you called that out. There's so much there we could unpack, right? So, um, I don't know. I wouldn't be where I am at now with the success of my coaching business without even my time at Starbucks and Amazon. I was blessed in each of those careers to have incredible mentors and leaders. And we know that not every leader is a good leader. They're just in the position. A lot of people elevate one level above their capacity and then burn out. And usually it screws everybody else around them because they're not leading effectively, right? Well, I was just blessed in every job that I've had at Starbucks and Amazon to have incredibly gifted leaders. So Starbucks was a people company first and foremost. So I learned the ins and outs of managing P&Ls and inventory and all of that, but specifically how to lead people. And I was always in that space, always a trainer, mentor, coach. I've interviewed, hired, fired, dealt with all sorts of situations there. Then when I got to Amazon, I had a shift here where I had to learn. So Starbucks, I started in grad school as a barista making like $0. I think it was like $6.35 an hour. And I grew up the chain of command. Okay. So when I was at Starbucks in a leadership role, I was leading from a place of subject matter expertise. It's one way to lead. But anybody in the business world will know sometimes if you take a lateral move or even another, go into a different org entirely. When I transitioned to Amazon, I was now at a technology company, specifically working in a call center. I had never done this before. So now I went from leading from a place of subject matter expertise to leading people who knew more than I did. So the key there was making sure to build and leverage relationships, earn trust. That was a big one. In my prior job at Starbucks, I earned trust because I was the subject matter expert, right? I
Wow.
was the best at all the things. And so I was able to grow. And then one step further, excuse me, when I got to Amazon, then I had to learn how do I build relationships and get buy-in from people who literally know more than I do about this job that I've never done their job, and I'm now in charge of them. I mean, when I took over, I was in charge of 200 people. I had like 15 direct reports and 200 indirect reports. So that was a challenge as well. And I moved from a little bit more of a people-oriented organization to Amazon, which is a data-driven organization, systems, data, processes for everything. we were never able, I would be in charge of a $30 million project. And you better believe that when I came with proposed changes or proposed projects, I had to have a truckload of verified data behind it to support what we were about to do. And so both of those things played a massive role in my success as a coach because leadership is leadership. I don't care what industry you're in. Coaching is leadership. I'm working with
Yeah.
people. If I got
All
a
right. So
job,
hold on. Yeah. All
go
right.
ahead.
Yeah. Well, okay. So you'll come back. You're going to come back to that. You're going to hit
Sure.
this point even harder, I think. But I've told people for years that sales is influence and leadership is influence.
Yes.
Therefore, leadership is sales and sales is leadership. And all three, influence, sales, leadership, it all hinges on credibility. And
Correct.
you just identify, I've never heard it said this way. This is unique to me. I've never heard this. You build credibility, which increases your ability to do selling, influencing, and leadership. You increase your credibility either through subject matter expertise or relationships, or you do both. But when you lack one, you've got to lean into the other.
Right.
Wow.
That's right.
Wow. That for the audience, it's my job to pick that out and have them go, wow, maybe the second time they hear it, because that's actually that's a big shift for some people.
Sure. It was a big shift for me. I remember when I first took over my first store and I was having a hard time with some of my shift supervisors getting some of their buy-in. Part of it was because I was young and ambitious, and some of these shift supervisors, they had no desire to elevate into a managerial role. They just wanted to be good at their job, and they knew more than I did. Once again, they'd been there longer. They had more rapport. And I'm now telling them what to do. And I couldn't get some of their buy-in. And my boss, again, great mentor, just kind of watched and observed for a while. He would come and camp out in my cafe and just watch. And he realized very quickly that I was struggling with what a lot of leaders struggle with, is that they think they have to know everything and have all the answers at all times. When I realized, or he helped me to see, like, hey, man, one of the ways that you can earn trust with your team is to be honest and say, I don't know. And say, what do you think? Like, and for me, it was like, no, I'm the leader, I'm the boss. I need to know everything. I need to have all the answers. And when I learned to kind of relinquish that and say, sometimes, you know what, guys, I don't know. Sometimes I'm taking the best approach that I think we should take, but I'm open to your input. What do you think we should do? And then they see, oh, he's a human, he bleeds too. He's now relatable, right? As so long as the leader still takes and shoulders the responsibility. There's a way to do this incorrectly, which says, I don't know what to do. What do you think we should do? And then blames them when it goes wrong.
Right.
But if
there's still decision making that you had to do, and you didn't cast the responsibility of that decision on the team. What you did is, through relationship building, you invited what's called collaboration.
Correct. I gave them ownership. I gave them a stake in what we were doing. And so then when it was successful, they feel that validation of, hey, I made a good call here. We collectively were successful. So yeah, that was a big learning for me.
When it comes to your amateur weightlifting amateur status, and you decided, I'm going to go pro and do strength training, bodybuilding, I'm going to compete, and I'm going to do it professionally. What were some of the biggest changes that you made from going amateur to pro? And you think maybe that there's some correlation between that journey and your business journey?
Well, I'm the type of personality, when I set out to do a thing, I have to be very careful of what I get involved with. I have to be careful not to take on or get into certain hobbies, because I tend to not be a good dabbler. I tend correct. And so the second that I started strongman, I did my first competition. I immediately did not care about my peer group. I said, who are the best in my weight class? And let me watch their videos. I want to compete with them. So I didn't just happen to turn pro. It didn't happen to me. I decided to make it happen. I was like, these are the guys I want to compete against. I want to prove myself against the best in the world. And so a lot of that is I just started acting like a professional before I ever was one. And so people say, fake it till you make it kind of thing. And I'm like, no, it's not faking it. Look, you want to be a pro, start acting like it. So every training session, treat it like you're a professional, like treat it with seriousness and diligence. That's what they do. You don't see a professional walk into the gym and screw around. And a lot of young guys they're maxing out their bench press every day, accomplishing zero things. No, go in there and train with intent. Have a plan, go in, execute when you're tired, when you don't want to. And so I think for me, it was a mindset of I always wanted to be. That was my goal. My goal was I want to compete against the best. And so I'm going to do what it takes to make sure that I do that. So it wasn't so much of a mindset shift. It was for me, I always had that mindset.
You became the pro before you turned pro.
100%.
Okay.
Zero. In fact, it's funny because I was coaching. My business was around, I would say I was coaching people for about 2-3 years before I turned pro. And it was hilarious. I made a comment about this on Instagram and Facebook at the time. The second I turned pro, naturally inquiries started flowing in, right? Because people are superficial and they are addicted to catchy, flashy titles, right? And so every up and coming strongman guy who was like, I want to be coached by the America's Strongest Man, zero things changed. If I won on Saturday, my training looked the same the next day on Sunday. Like there was nothing that changed. I was the same person. My coaching style was all the same. It finally became a reality that day, but literally nothing changed.
What you're recognized for in titles and accolades happened in reality long before the title and accolades showed up.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And so when people see, I'm going to do a post tomorrow on Instagram for Transformation Tuesday. People oftentimes see my transformation from dad bod to when I was like super shredded, my last bodybuilding competition. What they don't see is the years in between and the phases. And so I actually have a bunch of pictures of like, here's when I was 260, here's when I was 250, here's when I was 240, here's when I was 230, and like over the years of the changes. And so nobody has overnight success. Anybody that you think has had overnight success has been grinding in the darkness forever, right? Wow. Yeah, I mean, unless you win the lottery, right? You're not having overnight success.
And then go broke in 5 years anyway.
Exactly right. It's like these NBA players that don't know nobody taught them how to manage their money, right? And so they get their first $5 million check and they go out and, buy luxury cars, jewelry, and houses they can't even pay the income tax on.
Yeah.
Or property taxes on, rather.
Yeah. No, it's spot on. The last part of this podcast, which all of this has been just an awesome setup because the real topic and the real meat today for the Meathead Professor is going to be what's happening, not in a condescending, judgmental way, but what is happening to men, which to some extent could be their own fault, their own making, but to some extent, the society we're in today, the technology we have access to, the dopamine hits we have access to, what's happening, why is it men who are suffering probably the most from this trend? What's happened in the last 20, 30 years to this generation? And it's a negative thing. And it's starting to show up, not just in fitness, it's starting to show up in a lot of areas. What's that T word?
Testosterone.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah. Well, this question is so tough. Well, here's why. Well, one, I'm a Christian, so I bring my Christian worldview to this, and I would say I'm going to echo the thoughts of Solomon and say there's nothing new under the sun. And so when you look around at men today who seem to lack motivation, drive, a will to succeed, in other words, apathy, or men who abdicate their responsibilities, this goes back to the garden. Okay, because Adam's job was to guard the garden and his wife Eve, and we know she was there. She was not having this conversation alone because she takes the fruit and turns and gives it to her husband. And what's Adam doing? What's the first sin? We often blame Eve for taking the fruit, and yes, the scripture does lay blame on the fact that she was deceived. The scripture very clearly says Adam wasn't. Adam, the very first sin is Adam abdicating his responsibility. He
Huh.
should have freaking drove us. He should have killed the snake. That's a man's job, is to provide, to protect, and preside. And what did he do? He stood by, let his woman be deceived, and was like, yeah, that looks good. So this goes back to the garden. So the question that, like, it's like, how far back do you really want to go? Because otherwise, this podcast is going to last hours. They're going to talk about history and everything else. Specifically in our country, it's tough because there's a lot of causes, and
Let's
it's
talk about
like,
them. Okay,
yeah,
let's do this. Let's talk about where it's showing up. What is showing up?
sure,
Where is it showing up? And let's talk about causes at the end. This is fact. Now, those of you listening, some of you have a religious faith worldview or a background, and that was kind of the background that Anthony and I came from. And some of you may share that. Some of you, this might sound foreign. Some people out there will be like, what is he talking about? But here's what would be undeniable for once we get into what's happening in the modern day man today, and some of the things that you're going to bring to maybe our attention. There's going to be a lot of people that go, huh, that's me. Or, huh, yeah, I've seen a lot of that. And
sure,
I'm interested in there's this, okay, so here's where the setup is. And then this will probably help, I think, take it to the next level. I was reading a USA Today article, and it said the average 25-year-old male today has the same testosterone level as a 60-year-old man from 20 years ago. Now, whether or not that's true, there's got to be research that's backing this idea that the average man today is suffering from a lack of drive.
sure.
Okay, so can we?
Yeah, that's true, by the way. It is. I look at blood panels all the time. It's 100% true. Um, so you don't want to start with causes. You want to start with,
Where is it showing up? Where are we seeing this? What are the symptoms that are showing up in society today that make you go, "Yep, there it
oh,
is."
well, I mean, I think you look at the simple. So my dad works at an electrical company. They can't get young men in there to work to save their lives. So for every 10 men retiring out of the trades, only 3 are entering. And by the way, I love the white collar business world, but there's a lot more millionaires in work boots than there are suits.
Sure.
And I encourage young men, you need to explore the trades. You could go, my son, he likes working with his hands. Okay. We homeschool him. He could be apprenticing at 16. By 20 years old, he could have his journeyman electric license, no debt. Okay. Become a foreman, work for a couple of years, get your feet under you, master the craft, start your own business, be a millionaire by 30. I'm seriously, it's right now the average income for an electrician average in Austin, Texas is 200 grand a year.
Wow.
Like, yeah, it's exploding down there. Okay. Somewhere along the way, men have just completely abdicated. But a lot of it is, I mean, go back to COVID. Hey, you're unessential. What kind of message does that say to the
Wow.
men? Your work is not essential. Go home and sit around and let daddy government take care of you.
Jeez.
And in a prior era where men actually had testosterone and firmly located their balls, they would 100% go, hell no. Like that's not what we're doing, right? Our grandparents would not have done that. It's just not going to happen. But too many guys have just said, okay, and they're comfortable accepting handouts.
Hmm.
Yeah. So the current state is men who simply, unfortunately, you have to look at the instances of how many boys are growing up in fatherless homes. How can
Wow.
you expect a man to be a man when he doesn't know what a man is or what a man is supposed to do or when he's had a terrible example of a father in his home? Right. And here's the hard part. It's hard to blame them in terms of, hey man, I get it. You know, if you didn't have a dad growing up, if he walked out on you and you just didn't have that positive male role model, that sucks. And it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. A lot of guys don't seem to understand that dichotomy. Not everything in life is your fault, but everything's your responsibility.
Wow.
You have to embrace that. Here's the thing. If I
Wow.
pull out right now out of my driveway and I get T-boned and it's not my fault, Still got to call my insurance company. Still got to figure out how we're getting the tow truck. Got to call the body shop. Got to get a rental car. I got to go do all the stuff and take responsibility to get it all sorted out. Not my fault. Totally my responsibility.
Interesting. Wow. Uh, so let's talk about how does dopamine, the easy access to dopamine in our culture, how does that affect all this? You're the expert.
Yeah,
I'm asking somewhat vague questions because I don't
sure.
feel highly informed on it. I almost feel dangerous enough to ask probably the wrong questions. So you might
No,
take this a whole nother direction.
no, it's okay. Again, nothing new under the sun, but we have, with the advent of the internet and technology and more processing power in our hands than anyone could ever imagine, we have access to dopamine fixes everywhere, right? So, um, I saw a funny meme the other day. It's funny. It's also sad and true. It was like men did much greater things when it was harder to see boobs. And it's true. It's true. Here's the thing. Here's the deal. Okay. It used to be that if a man wanted to get a woman and have sex with her, he had to marry her. Okay, he had to, which meant he then had to have the approval of her father, which meant he had to be preferably an upstanding man with some means and way of caring for his daughter. So a man who couldn't offer that to a father is going to be denied. So what does this young man set out to do? He sets out to be an apprentice. He's some kind of blacksmith, some kind of, cooper, or some sort of skill or trade that he can offer himself to say, I want you to be my wife, and I need your father's blessing, or it's not going to happen. And he has to offer that. We don't. That's gone. That is gone from most of society. At this point, did you know statistically, one could think it's a net good, but teenagers are having less sex now than ever before. And some might say, well, good, we don't want teenagers out having a bunch of sex, which is objectively true, but the reasons for it are horrible because they can just look at porn. Okay. And this can happen with anything. You get a dopamine hit when you eat that junk food. You get a dopamine hit when you look at that porn. And you get a dopamine hit when you live on video games and conquer in a fake world. The problem is when you have dopamine divorced from actual effort, that's when it becomes problematic. Wow. Right? Huberman talks about this. Alec Huberman on his Huberman Lab podcast. And I think that's where it becomes detrimental, is that dopamine is everywhere. It's easy. And so if you entice a bunch of young men with you don't have to work hard for your food anymore. In fact, in America, most poor people are fat, right? Because they eat processed junk, and you can give them free porn. Did you know that this is literally a tactic Hitler knew, that porn was so destabilizing, he got rid of it in the Third Reich. Again, not for, fantastic motivations, like he wants a noble society with wonderful ethics, as he was hell-bent on exterminating people who didn't meet his criteria. But he realized that porn destabilized the men. Okay, it's literally been used as a war tactic. Okay, it's a known strategy that Israel has disseminated porn in Palestine for years in order to destabilize them. But hey, dude, we should know this. We have the Old Testament. What was the curse? Remember the story of Balaam's donkey? What was King Balak trying to get Balaam to do? He was trying to get them to curse Israel, but specifically what he was trying to get them to do was be sexually attracted to these foreign women so that they would go over there, sleep with them, forget Yahweh, and completely abandon the covenant. Balak could come in and take over Israel because of their degeneracy. This is as old as time, dude. It's just, instead, we don't need a pagan Balaam with a talking donkey. We could just click on Pornhub. It's the same thing. Wow. It's the same. Again, there's nothing new under the sun. It's just new strategies and new ways of doing it.
So this is interesting because I went through a journey where struggled with alcohol, beat it, over 7 months sober and going strong, like just staying on
Awesome.
my journey to stay sober. And one of the things you and I talked about when I became a client and said I got to get my fitness and my nutrition, that even alcohol was starting to destroy my testosterone levels.
Yeah.
And that has a lot of side effects, right?
Mhm.
But one of the things you said is, as a trainer training professionals, you would draw blood panels
Absolutely.
from people, and you were watching the testosterone levels. This is like not even an opinion anymore. You were literally drawing the
Sure.
blood and going, where are the levels? And they're
Yeah.
drop like, okay, so a 30-year-old today is what, like a 50, 60-year-old man from 10 years ago?
Yeah. But it depends on your lifestyle. So we have to get into causes a little bit
All
here.
right, let's do it.
Yeah. So there's a lot of factors at play here. Um, a generally more sedentary lifestyle. I mean, the simple fact of the matter is, um, I'm a nutrition coach, but I actually spend most of my day right here sitting behind a computer. So outside of my training that I do, and I train jujitsu as well, outside of that, like I have to be intentional about moving. So we've moved from an agrarian society where we walk everywhere, where farming is the main thing, to where a lot of people are seated for much of the day. So we are inactive. So there's that to blame. Um, there's also the simple fact that our food is nothing like the food of our great grandparents. Um, Again, this is a whole discussion in and of itself. There's a lot of foods that we eat in the United States that are completely banned in Europe and other countries. Now, I certainly don't want the government getting involved in trying to legislate what we can and can't put in their bodies. We saw how that worked with the old jab for the last couple of years, and the government's completely inept at everything it does. So I don't want them touching anything. But that does mean then the onus is on us as the consumer to pay attention to what we're putting into our bodies. And that's the biggest thing that I'm seeing is, the things that you need, that a man needs for healthy testosterone levels is he needs to work hard, he needs to exercise, he needs good sleep, he needs enough protein, quality animal fats, like quality fats in his diet. And so those are kind of the recipes for quality testosterone. Um, I have been coaching men towards that, and I would see their natural testosterone rise a little bit, just a little bit, and kind of negligible, to be perfectly honest with you. And it's
Huh.
frustrating because 20 years ago, I think men who testosterone were in the toilet could naturally get it back to pretty high normal. I'm a pretty big advocate of TRT now for guys over 30, 35 years old if they're feeling like they need it and they've tried all these other natural interventions and it's only gone up a little bit because we are so inundated with xenoestrogens everywhere. So, um, if you use a microwave, if you microwave plastic, if you drink bottled water, if you use regular detergents, deodorant, a lot of toothpaste, like it's in everything. Scented candles, like so. Unless you're going to be one of these people who starts making your own deodorant, all of your own laundry detergent, and go for it. If you're listening to it, and you want to do it. Hey, listen, I still use a microwave because it's convenient, and I have to eat a lot of food, but I only microwave in glass containers. I don't store my stuff in plastic. But guess what? I was out at the gym today and the fountain water tastes like ass. So I bought a bottle of water from the gym and drank out of a plastic bottle. Oh no. Right? Like I can't, you could try to be obsessive and make sure that you never store any food and anything with BPAs in it. So you only drink out of
All
a
right,
BPA
hold on,
water
slow down,
bottle.
slow down, slow down. All right, hold on. The audience, if you're losing me, I know there's gonna be all of this stuff, all of this. There's things that boost it, and there's also
Mm-hmm.
things that strip it out, strip it away.
That's right.
So what are you threw in some acronyms? You brought up estrogen, you brought up chemicals, you brought up plastics. Like, so what are some of the things that are probably just a part of our society? We're not getting rid of it. We just got to be aware of it. And then what are some of the things that it's like, no, 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 I don't have to do it that way.
Sure. I mean, some people would say they don't want to get rid of their microwave. They don't want to get rid
No.
of storing stuff in plastic containers or drinking out of plastic water bottles. I mean, I suppose you could cut down on plastic water bottles, go buy a BPA, you know, Yeti tumbler
Yeah,
and
so I have one of these.
Sure, there you go.
Yeah,
You could do
stainless
that.
steel.
The big rocks, you can prioritize good sleep hygiene. Like you don't need to
Hmm.
binge watch Netflix until and get 4 hours, 5 hours of sleep a night. Like you should prioritize good sleep. You can control how much you walk. You can control your protein intake. You can control your exercise. I don't care if you're dirt poor. You don't need a gym to lace up your kicks and go outside for a walk and do some push-ups, do some body weight squats. Like you still control what you put in your mouth. You still control your exercise. So there's a lot in your control. There's a
Yeah.
ton in your control. I mean, here's the deal. At the end of the day, low testosterone or not, nobody's holding a gun to your head saying, eat the Pop Tarts, watch the porn, be a dork and spend 6 hours on video games tonight. Like nobody's doing that. You still have choices. Again, we still have responsibilities to make the right choices. But it's a combination of all of these things, man. It's all of these things. It's the environment that we live in. It's our own lifestyle choices, our poor lifestyle choices, and it's also messaging from every angle of the media. Toxic masculinity. Masculinity is bad, right? Girls run the world. Sorry, Beyonce, girls don't run the world. Like all respect to the ladies out there, but here's the deal: patriarchy is inevitable. It's either going to be a good one or a bad one. You pick, but it's inevitable. And I'm sure that will, rub some people the
Oh,
wrong way, but prove me wrong. It's not wrong because here's the deal: because women will be like, you know what, I can go out and earn just as much as a man. Blah blah blah. Okay, cool. Like you realize OnlyFans is owned by a man, right? Like you're gonna go and all right, Deborah, you here's your 15-minute break, says your boss Kevin, as he tells you you can go and eat something before you slave for another 8 hours. Right? Like, come on.
well,
It's
so here's an interesting thought. Maybe, just maybe, what we're actually starving for is not toxic masculinity. We're starving for good masculinity.
well,
God,
100%.
that's what we're starving for.
100%. Yeah, the toxic masculinity would be the father who walks out on his family, the father who doesn't, love his wife and raise his kids well and educate them and take responsibility for his family and provide and protect and protect. That's toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity is gang culture, right? That's toxic masculinity. Uh, but it's we need actual masculinity. We are very much deprived of that in this
That's
culture.
interesting. So where do you see? So one of the reasons I brought this up today is I watched, and nobody could ever take this away from me. I watched over the last 7 months. I watched a transformation in my life from my ability to comprehend new information, my ability to communicate, my fitness, my nutrition, my energy levels, my ability to generate business growth, relationship growth, mental health, anxiety, depression, all that stuff. I watched this full body, full person, full mind, all of it start to transform over the last 7, 8 months. And I had to get rid of a poison first. But
Sure.
then I realized that once I got rid of that, there was still so much work to do to regain that version of man I wanted to be, right? And you've been instrumental in that. And I saw it bleed over into not bleed over, just I saw it really have an impact in my business. I saw it
That's
really
awesome.
have an impact. And then once I saw it start to have an impact in my business, and I started to see, because I train associates, and then there's a huge percentage of associates coming into my industry that are women, and I like it. It's great. It's awesome. I
Sure.
applaud them. I think it's wonderful. But I've noticed that when it comes to entrepreneurship or the drive to learn something new, I'm like, dude, where are the guys at? And so when I watched what happened in my
Mhm.
own personal life have a positive impact in my business, what would be from a health and nutrition coach who's also an entrepreneur? What would you say? This is a closing, like, this is the cherry on top for everybody, especially the dudes that are out there that you are entrepreneurs, but you are not entrepreneurs yet. That you want to get at, but from a health and nutrition coach, how would you talk to a guy right now about how his whole body, health of the whole body, mind, body, all of it is going to affect him in business? What would you say to all that?
Oh man. You want me to like wrap it up in a nice little bow, and that is such a huge. You could write a book on this. There are books on this, man. Um, well, first off, we can't divorce the systems of the body. They all work together. Again, bringing my Christian worldview into this. I mean, the oftentimes we talk today like, oh, I love you from the bottom of my heart. Okay, in ancient times, your bowels seems weird, but your bowels were the seat of the emotion. It's
Hmm.
interesting because we know that today gut health is so critical, and like 98% of the serotonin that you produce in your body is produced in your gut. So if you eat like shit, you're going to feel like shit, you're going to think like shit, you're going to make terrible decisions. I mean, it's really simple. And fundamentally, what we put in our mouth, it's like the most basic thing that we have control over. So if you can't be disciplined with what you put into your face, what does it say about every other area of your life? Right. So, but if you can discipline your body, if you can bring your body under subjection, which is basic to everyone, it doesn't matter your socioeconomic status, everyone can discipline their body, then they're going to be disciplined. It's going to impact these other things. The Apostle Paul talks about this, bringing his body under subjection. And that for Paul yielded a spiritual reality. I've seen this in my business, even from just a simple confidence standpoint. I've
Hmm.
dieted down to 3% body fat. There's not a whole lot I can't do. That's pretty freaking miserable. Okay. Like strongman was hard on the body, sure. Deadlifting 800 pounds, overhead pressing 400 pounds, that's hard on the body. Being perfect on a diet for 6 months on end, and literally never varying and getting up every day no matter what you want, doing your cardio and everything, it's hard. It's a mentally tough thing. And so completing that task, um, I know if I can discipline and bring my body under subjection for that long, and suffer, then when something comes up in my business, when COVID arises and I need to pivot and can't personal train in person anymore and I have to pivot online, I can pivot. I can figure it out. And so there's a confidence that it brings to you, but I think there's also a clarity. Uh, Again, when you are healthy internally, you're going to be much sharper mentally as well. You're going to be much more regulated emotionally, which is going to help you make better decisions. So it fits into everything. Obviously, I know of examples of people who are incredibly successful businessmen who are overweight.
Sure.
And he would not mind me mentioning him or just alluding to him. There's a man that I've been coaching now for 2 years. He's the CEO of a steel company. And when we started working together, he was well over 500 pounds. We're now closing in on that 300-pound mark. He was a very good businessman before that. Dude, his business is like 10x since he's in the billions now. Okay.
Wow.
It's like 10x because I did a couple things for him. One, he's getting control of his nutrition, but also I helped him to manage his stress. I banned him from taking his laptop home. I'm like, dude, you're working 24/7, but your wife and kids never see you. Your family life and your relationships are suffering. You think that you're doing it for the business. You're not. You cannot pour out to these guys into this business with an empty cup. Like you've got to separate these things out. And so when he started prioritizing his relationships and his physical health, his business is nuts. And they've been through the ringer with a lot of different, issues around COVID and everything else. And the business is thriving and he's healthier and happier than ever. So I've seen it time and again that when, for every example that you can think of someone who's super successful, but they're overweight, dude, if they get in shape, they're only going to be more successful, like period, the end. It's not going to detract. It's only going to add.
Wow. For the audience listening in, I thought this was a really cool way to kick off the year because at the beginning of January, everybody has these resolutions, which I personally, I'm just going to say, you were controversial as hell today, which I think people are going to like. And I actually like it. I like the sandpaper feel and people go, "Oh, that's fun for me." But I hate New Year's resolutions because every Sunday night you should have a weekly resolution. You should have 52 resolutions every year and tackle every week. But people come up with these resolutions and they last about 3 weeks and then they're in the gutter again. And the idea of fitness, nutrition, and finance is usually those are at like usually the top of the list, right? So me doing what I do for a living, you doing what you do for a living, I thought this was a really cool way to kick off the year.
Sure.
And I really do believe that if people want to have a positive impact in every area of their life, Americans specifically,
Sure.
could probably use a healthy dose of real talk on the topic of nutrition
Yeah.
and fitness. And so I'm so grateful you were able to kick off our year with this podcast.
Yeah.
For those of you that would like to get to know Anthony better, and even look into his services and look into what he's doing, go to follow on Instagram, the Meathead Professor, and he's out of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. But he's a good friend of mine and somebody that I would recommend to anybody, not just for the sake of fitness and nutrition coaching, but he's a thinker. Obviously, you showcased that today. And if it's all right with you, I would love to have you on as a second repeat
Yeah,
guest
absolutely.
in the future. But thank you again, Anthony, for being on today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.